Happy Friday, November 24th, 2017. Today is Black Friday. Hope everybody had a good Thanksgiving yesterday and didn't get trampled today at Walmart. Of course, I suppose that if you did get trampled, you probably wouldn't be watching this, but... First note before we get started, the Sonic has been delayed until February 9th of next year. The plant's running full tilt right now just to keep up with current demand. It's holiday season, Plus is probably the most anticipated release in company history, so rather than release it just so it can be indefinitely backordered, they're going to take their time and do it right so that when it does come out, you can actually go out and get it. Yeah, we have to wait another couple months, but I'm very happy with their decision. Plus, I'm not really sure I can take many more great releases right now. I mean, I have to reduce 12 balls down to 6 right now just to go to League because they're all so good and I want to throw them all. So, anyway, today we're going to talk a little Triple D, a.k.a. the Daredevil Danger, little High Road Nano. Going to recap how the GTO went for me last week in Tulsa. Some Rambo Ray Lussier, and consequently some thoughts about how to overcome negativity, so this might be like a bonus long holiday edition podcast or something. I finally got my opinion video out for the Danger. I'm glad I didn't get it done before I went to Tulsa because this weekend just added to the legend that has become my relationship with it. If you caught the hint in the title, you realize it was just part 1. Part 2 is a huge helping of crow that the Danger served to me over the weekend in Tulsa. The High Road Nano, of course, is a freak of nature. It still shapes like a High Road, but it's a couple arrows stronger than the other one, so despite the OG still being a legend, it just doesn't quite have the teeth for heavier, longer volumes, so having a High Road that can handle soup now almost seems unfair. As far as the Danger goes, though, I didn't like it when I made my review video. It was super over-under. It hit like a pancake too often. And unless I was perfect, I felt like I was Gordon Ramsay on Hell's Kitchen dealing with a bunch of incompetent chefs. Like I was actually getting pissed at it to the point where I was using English insults at it. Like maybe it wasn't understanding me or something. I need to change it up. This doesn't change my rating though for it, and I'm really happy about that. The rating is specifically to weed out as much opinion as possible, and despite the change in how I personally feel about the ball now, I'm still very happy with my rating for it. I'd still rate it exactly the same again right now, so the numbers are true. I just understand where this ball fits for me a little bit better now. That being said, I'd still never use it fresh out of the box unless you've got a lot of oil in the middle, a lot of friction outside, specifically a lot of friction outside. It's wildly over-under for me on fresh. It kind of jerks off of friction, so getting it to smooth out that transition was kind of key for me to unlocking the potential of the Danger. I almost didn't take it to Tulsa because I didn't even want to give myself the opportunity to cave and try it out. And when I did finally cave, it's only because the track had it burned pretty severely. I needed something that boomed on the back end from deep. Problem is, the Danger was the only thing that fit that description, mainly because I hate that shape and never need it. I want something smooth off friction so I can avoid as much over-under as possible, but everything else I had was either too weak or too strong, except for that miserable wee the Danger. I hated myself the whole time for pulling it out, even though everything went exactly as I hoped and it sucked everything off the deck. I just knew it was going to start leaving flat 10s on me a couple shots when I created a bit of carry down. Especially from that angle, with that speed, backing off of my rev rate, I just knew it was going to happen, and then it didn't. The track was burnt, but the pattern wasn't heavy enough to begin with to use something stronger like the Intense or the No Rules Pearl and just hammer on it. I needed something to get through the heads, but still roll and be somewhat firm on the friction, but that I could kind of keep tight to the pocket because bouncing the track was just too inconsistent. The Intense was reading too early. The All Out had looked good up to that point, but just doesn't have the guts to finish that strongly from those kind of angles, being faded or flat flung through the middle. Not to mention the shape's just not quite right for it. So after looking at everything I had, I realized I just didn't have anything like the Danger. That's what I was stuck with. So yeah, I took 9 balls to a tournament on a house shot, carried them all inside, and then sounded like an idiot when I said I didn't have the ball I needed. But it turns out that I really did though. There were some execution errors, and it was several games before I really got comfortable with what I was doing, but I was able to fake it for those couple games. I learned a few things. We bowled 2 team sets on Saturday and doubles and singles on Sunday. I used the All Out for the first 2 games of first team and the Danger for the 3rd game to a 673, so I didn't hurt myself. I just didn't really do anything special. I tried to start out the 2nd team set with the Danger, which was a predictable disaster again. I opened with the 169, but the lanes were transitioning fast, so they were burning into exactly what I wanted to get to, which the lanes transition pretty well the same as the first set, and the Danger looked really good there. So I salvaged that set. by shooting 659 after starting them with that 169, but it was a rough set for everybody on the pair. The lanes just transitioned every shot, it seemed like. The next day for doubles and singles, I knew I had it figured out. So I threw 12 shots in practice, I struck on 10 of them, and then that's when it got really interesting. I've never seen a rack that looked so good for being so bad, but for a solid 2 games, we couldn't get the 8-pin out on the right lane. I've never seen anything like it. I don't know what the hell happened, but there were 6 or 7 8-10s. There were several stone or rain 10s that the 8 got kicked out late on. There was even a dead flush 7-8 plus obviously all those stuff 8-pins that we could handle. I've never seen anything like it. I mean, the left lane shared a little bit of it, but it was consistently on the right lane. The 3-pin was a little right, the 2 was a little left, occasionally the 5-pin was a little right, but however it all added up, the 8-pin just did not go down for the first 2 games, and when it did actually go down, it went down really hard. So the first 2 games were kind of a struggle just to get pins to fall, but once the lanes burnt and the entry angles straightened out, the carry issues for the most part went away. However, I think it was ultimately an oddly good thing because it really loosened me up. I'd had problems the entire day before with not wanting to let go of the ball because I just didn't trust it. And instead of trying to be so precise after opening game 1 of singles with a 180, I thought, well, the pins aren't going to go down whether I grab it or let go of it or not, so I might as well just get some practice in because this day's shot. And that's when everything opened up. I started flying out of it at the bottom, and once we had to get deep, I had a look that literally nobody else in the building had. I was fading it from between 4th and 5th arrow to about 12 or 13, and it was flying right through the middle of the lane and then stopping and turning on a dime and was driving through the pocket with a ton of power. I almost got tapped a couple times, but the ball reaction was just too clean and strong for the pins to stand up. The next several games, the pins just didn't stand up. I salvaged my singles set, turned it into a 673, so it won't quite cash. But then I shot 235, 300 the first 2 games of doubles before the shot just got too wrecked for anybody to keep up with it. So I finished with another 180, which was, was a little disappointing, but I'm going to cash pretty easily in several different events. Should be enough to pay for the trip, so I can't complain too much. The 300, though, was one of the best I've ever thrown, and the 10th frame specifically might have been the best 10th frame I've ever thrown in my life. I mean, all 3 were absolutely as perfect as you could hope for in the 10th frame period, whether you're shooting 300 or not. They were just those kinds of shots where your timing's so good and everything's so smooth that you know that you're going to strike halfway through your 3rd step. And even as bad as the carry had been on that pair, when I stepped up for the first shot in the 10th, I already knew that I had 300. I just had to actually throw the shots. Now, it helped that I was on the left lane instead of the right, but the left lane wasn't without sin either. I mean, all that rambling, of course, brings me to the point that I shot it with the bloody idiot danger. It feels like when someone is completely worthless and you tell them about themselves and then they do something just once to prove you wrong and then go right back to being worthless again, but because they still came through that one time, because they have that one thing to hold over your head now, you really just can't honestly justify complaining about them anymore. I didn't like this ball. I was really enjoying hating it. And after every single shot I threw that game, every single shot of the 300, I came back saying, I still hate that ball. I still hate that ball. Now, hopefully that means that it actually understands American and was trying to prove me wrong. The weird thing is, though, I don't think it's a one-hit wonder. We're going to be like the Notebook couple. So if you watch my Danger Opinion Part 2, you've kind of seen that little part. We fight. I mean, we're going to fight and fight and fight, but ultimately I swear this ball will be in my bag for years. I'm ordering at least 1 or 2 more. It's so ridiculously good at what it does that I'll just never leave anywhere without it. I mean, this is the second time I've had to eat crow. The first time was over the Hustle Inc. and now over the Danger. I'd still never use it on a fresh shot again, of course, but I might actually start destroying the track on purpose just so I can get it out. So instead of going all-out show-off Danger, I might go high-road nano Danger. So anyway, moving on, the World Series of Bowling has concluded. I want to talk about it, but I can't because I'd be including some spoilers. So I'm just going to wait until the shows have aired to talk about that. But I can say that there's some really, really great shows. We are going to talk about a bowler, though, one Raymond Lussier from Canada, and I'm going to let my inner geek out here a little bit. I know this guy best as Rambo Ray. He's one of the COD fathers, or one of the biggest names of professional gaming. He's a huge reason why the whole eSports thing has blown up pretty lately. So while he's been a great bowler for a long time, too, he's best known as Rambo Ray, professional Call of Duty player. though he's retired now and he's working for Sledgehammer Games and as a coach for Team Envious, or just letters NV as most people call him. Ray bowled the World Series of Bowling this year, and there was some buzz about him and his other career. He was on Youth Team Canada for 4 years, so I'm sure there's a lot of Canadian bowlers that know who he was. But if you're from the States, unless you're competitive gaming and specifically a competitive Call of Duty fan, you likely had no idea who he was before they started talking about him. Now, this obviously produced some mixed reactions because some thought it was cool, others just started ragging on professional gaming. It's like, oh wow, this guy sits in his mom's basement playing video games, like how impressive is that? But first of all, for those who don't know, there's way more money in competitive or professional gaming than bowling. The team that won the World Call of Duty Championship this year got $600,000 to split between the 4 members, and that's just the one tournament. It's not to mention their huge YouTube channels, myriads of sponsors. Being a top-tier professional gamer takes as much skill and as much effort and time as it does for any other athlete and any other sport. So the fact that he's so good at both bowling and gaming is seriously impressive to me. However, there's still kind of a stigma to the gaming part. Even bowling is kind of looked down on because it's not one of the major sports and people kind of make fun of it, but gaming is further down the ladder in terms of respect, like a lot further. It seems like physicality is all it takes for something to get respect. And I think the NFL gets the most respect just because it's so physical. It's kind of the biggest sport out there right now, followed somewhere by baseball, basketball, hockey, golf, soccer, stuff like that. But the less physical and the more mental sports or games don't get nearly as much respect for some reason. And this is where gaming falls because it's not physical at all. I mean, I think it's somewhere below table tennis and darts as far as respect goes. So as long as you can sit upright and stay awake, you're probably going to be fine with gaming, but naturally there's some concerns such as tendonitis, carpal tunnel, long-term effects of sitting that much. But considering people in more physical sports break bones and tear ligaments and ACLs and all kind of stuff like that, little carpal tunnel doesn't really seem like that big of a deal to me. Not to mention most gamers are very aware of the health concerns, and most of them are in just as good a shape or better than some of the professional athletes in other sports. Optic Gaming, which is the biggest eSports organization out there, even has their own nutritionist and kind of personal trainer. So keeping yourself in shape is essential to keeping your mind sharp, and because gaming is extremely mental for one and requires perfect hand-eye coordination for two, being sharp and being quick is absolutely necessary and critical to being a high-level player. That's not going to happen if you're just sitting in your mom's basement munching on Doritos and drinking Monsters. So now, as far as what I'm getting at, where this is concerned, is that stigma, or the way that things are viewed or perceived in bowling. There's an obvious pecking order or a series of clicks. I mean, basically, your skill or perceived skill places you in a certain group, and you're treated and regarded according to your so-called status. And more here recently, how pretty you look throwing the ball is for some reason the biggest measure of how much you're respected up to a certain point that I'll get to in a minute. I had someone ask me the other day if how I threw the ball bothered me, and what they were talking about was respect and how it's seen, not if it hurt or felt weird or anything. They were just asking if what other people thought about it bothered me. And the honest answer was, yeah, it does. Not because I'm super self-conscious about it, but simply because of how it's perceived. I mean, no one's going to look at me and say, oh, wow, look at, that guy looks like he knows what he's talking about. I'm going to listen to him. Also, no one says, well, he throws it kind of weird, but I bet he just knows so much, or he's so smart that he has trouble just keeping it simple and executing. They look at it and kind of wrinkle up their nose and walk away. I'm definitely no one that anybody wandering the concourse is going to stop and watch for longer than it takes to note how funny I throw it. So the bottom line is that no one's going to think from watching me that I have a clue about anything, because if I did, obviously I wouldn't throw it like that. So on the flip side, if you throw the ball pretty, you must be great. You must average 240 and you must be a genius and a technical expert. People will fall over themselves making excuses for people who throw the ball well, even if that person is just physically talented and has zero clue what they're actually doing. If someone like that's having struggles, it's either, oh wow, well the lanes must have changed, or that ball didn't act right, or man, how did they not carry that? But when I get tapped, it's like, well, yeah, I mean, look at how he throws the ball. And when I do well, it's just like, but he's not even any good. I mean, even as far to say, well, that just goes to show what state bowling's in right now, if even that guy's shooting 300. So let's wind the clocks back a few decades of some of the classic bowlers, guys that were and still are respected back when knocking down the pins was the measure of how good someone was. Dick Weber wasn't very pretty. His timing was early. He had no follow through. He fell off nearly every shot. Mark Roth was herky-jerky. He held the ball really funny. His hand and arm did all kinds of things in his backswing, and he really wrenched on it at the bottom. Walter Ray, I mean, quite possibly the worst form of professional bowling history. Great timing, but does nearly everything else, quote-unquote, wrong. At the same time, these are a few of the greatest bowlers in the history of the game, and people remember them for winning, but they also remember them because the way that they threw the ball was part of the deal. It was kind of like their personality. Now, that was back when it was just a guy picking up a ball and trying to knock down more pins than everyone else, back before numbers and math and crazy detailed statistics and all this technical stuff they have now. And while the commentators will marvel at the physical games of a lot of the younger guys, how smooth and how really beautifully they throw the ball, to be perfectly honest, there's something too mechanical about it sometimes, like something too sterile and almost kind of soulless about it. When they just post the shot, strike, don't smile, don't show any kind of emotion, just kind of act like that's how it's supposed to go and walk back and sit down. When they do show emotion, it's almost like they're angry rather than happy. Now, wrapping back around to where we started here, Rambo caught a lot of hell for being a pro gamer. People thought that was kind of an oxymoron. He had to deal with a lot of negativity and ridicule, especially because when he was doing it, it was really looked down on, and it wasn't as socially acceptable as it is now. I mean, come on. I mean, somebody who took video games seriously and tried to be a video game professional, I mean, that still just doesn't quite sound right, especially the over 40 crowd. As far as bowling goes, you still have guys that throw kind of weird, but you don't really notice it so much anymore because most of them are older bowlers or names that you already know. So you just don't really pay attention. But then you have a few younger ones like Jacob Buttriff. Just imagine for a minute how much he's had to go through just to get where he's at right now. I mean, he's got some of the oddest looking form ever, and the first half of his last name is Butt. I mean, just getting through high school had to be hard enough, but then having to gain respect the hard way for his bowling, when everyone that watches him kind of recoils in horror at what he does with the bowling ball until, they watch it strike over and over again. But to me, people like him are the most dangerous, and I mean that in a positive way. I mean, I don't know the details or his particular story, but you can pretty well guess, can't you? I mean, I'm sure that he's gone through more than his fair share of shiatsu. I'm also sure that he's better for it. He's completely owned it. He's one of the most confident and truly skilled guys out there right now. He's won 25% of the professional tournaments that he's entered, so just think about that number for a second. And he's done it all by kind of corkscrewing a urethane ball and having Butt in his last name. We need to be teaching kids to be more like Jacob mentally. As a coach, it's kind of hard sometimes. There's a fine line between deciding on what's a quirk and what's an actual flaw that needs corrected or removed. Most of the time, you have to just take what someone does and find a way to make it better instead of completely change it. But imagine how much might have been different for him if some uppity coach got a hold of him and told him he was terrible and doing it all wrong and tried to turn him into another mechanical collegiate drone. Now, this isn't all just a bunch of excuses or justification for anything, but if you have noticed, professional bowling is starting to kind of get its personality back. I'm having more fun watching shows with guys like Kyle Troop and Jesper Svensson. Belmo, it's nice seeing Liz make another show. Simonelli, EJ Tackett, Norm Duke is still wildly entertaining. And, of course, Jacob Buttriff. There for a while, the PBA fell too much in love with its own ego and tried to be like the bowling version of the PGA, but what it amounted to was a lot of lifeless telecasts, ones that Pete Weber wasn't on anyway, and some really embarrassing moments, in my opinion. That tournament where you had these cheerleaders or whatever escorting Norm and Simonelli into their championship match, I mean, even the cheerleaders at this year's World Series of Bowling seemed like a little overkill or a little tacky, but it seemed so dead and cheap and cheesy there for a while, and I think things are finally starting to come back around because of this kind of infusion of all different kinds of players. I mean, guys like Tom Smallwood. There's another guy that throws it funny, but he's good and he's respected. Some of it might go a little bit overboard sometimes. Some of the Pete Weber antics and the hair and the outfits of Kyle Troop might seem a little silly, but I'd rather have people pushing the issue than kind of hanging back and being overly reserved. I mean, you've got to admit the hair-picking thing at the doubles tournament with Kyle Troop was actually pretty good. Now, I'm sure that some of these guys would love to throw the ball like Marshall Kent or Bill O'Neill or John Zerbinski. I mean, that guy might have the best physical game on the planet outside of Belmo, but sometimes we all pay too much attention to what everyone else is doing instead of what we do, and I'm certainly guilty of that. I felt pretty self-conscious the whole weekend in Tulsa because I went with a group of guys who are not only legitimately good bowlers, but they also, I mean, they look the part too, and then there's me. So regardless of the fact my low set of the 4 was 659 and then I shot 300, it's still kind of just, yeah, but he throws it weird. When you're in the kind of place I am, when you have to try and get respect the hard way, and when you don't feel like you're able to just hang out with the good bowlers or go talk a big game when people are rolling their eyes at you, it's difficult, but it's so much more rewarding when you finally take a really big step. Because I throw the ball so weird, I've had to learn things, and I've had to get good at things that other more physically talented bowlers may not have had to. I've learned how to still get the pins down and fake it when I'm throwing it awful, and ultimately I've gained a lot of real and solid confidence from what I've built myself, not from hearing endless praise because of an impressive physical game or because I can throw pins around. I'm finally getting to the point where I'm secure with who I am and what I do, and if someone wants to underestimate me because I've kept my head down, because I've kind of stayed on the outside, or because I'm self-aware to the point that I'm almost harder on myself than I should be, then that's just going to be their mistake. I'm not saying I'm going to go take the PBA by storm or anything. I'm quite content to just be a good house shot bowler and kind of a weekend warrior, but I know what I'm good at now. I have a good handle on where I'm at and where I want to go. I'd have never gotten to this point if I'd have had the John Zerbinski physical game, or look like him for that matter. I'm just a scrawny little ginger with a quirky loopy swing that's heavy on the elbow who makes slightly above average YouTube videos, and I'm okay with that. So for all of you out there who might be feeling self-conscious or might be, about what you do or how you throw the ball or where you're at with your own game, don't sweat the opinions of others. Just worry about your own opinion, because people will come and go, and most of the time, unfortunately, will use you for what they can get out of you or take advantage of your desire to improve or advance. This isn't to say that you shouldn't take into consideration the opinions and advice of smarter or better bowlers, but you have to learn how to apply that to yourself instead of trying to copy someone else. So learn how to make things work for you. Bowling's become way too much about how things are supposed to be rather than how they actually are. Be honest, be realistic, be self-aware, but most importantly, be you, because the real you is always going to be better than trying to fake being someone else. Maybe the real you is weird or is odd or doesn't fit in, but people usually are more drawn to others who don't fit the mold. Again, this is an excuse to just fly off the radar. There's no reason, but there's no reason to add more weight to your own shoulders just so you can feel like you're accomplishing more or overcoming more. You've still got to play by the rules, but the interesting thing is that the bowling code is a lot more like guidelines than actual rules. In closing, I want to thank everybody for watching again. Earlier this week, my channel hit 2,000 subscribers and has continued to climb since then, so happy Thanksgiving. Hope that you got some good Black Friday deals, and we will see you next Friday.